All right, folks, we are live.
All right. Good afternoon, everyone who's tuning in. Welcome to a virtual artist reception for Gregory Schulte's show, Tangled. So the first thing we're going to do is watch a video. We have a walkthrough of what the installation looks like in the gallery. We are live at the Abel Contemporary Gallery. We're located in Stoughton, Wisconsin, which is just outside of Madison. If you're not familiar with the gallery, we've been in business for 30 years, I think. And we represent about 100 artists from across the United States in all media. And we host 3 concurrent exhibits. Currently, in addition to Gregory Schulte's, solo show Tangled, we have a group show called Boxes, which includes a group of artists making beautiful contemporary boxes. And there is another artist upstairs in our number 5 space, Ian Van D. So those receptions will be in a week, and there's more information about that on our website, abelcontemporary.com. But what you're looking at right now is Gregory Schulte's show, Tangled. And I'm going to tell you a little bit about Gregory if you're not familiar with his work. Gregory Schulte has been a practicing artist for over 34 years, forging a national exhibition record of well over 140 shows across 22 states, including 18 solo exhibitions to date. He has received numerous show awards, teaching awards, grants, and fellowships. Most notable is the prestigious National Endowment for the Arts Regional Fellowship. His work has been placed in many public and private art collections. After completing his MFA degree in 1991 from the University of Wisconsin-Madison, he accepted a teaching position at Utah State University, where he received tenure in 1997. In 2003, he accepted his current position as director of the art department at Madison College. Throughout his career, Gregory has been represented by galleries across the country. Perimeter Gallery in Chicago, Illinois, Grace Chosey in Madison, to name a few. Currently, his work is represented exclusively here at Abel Contemporary Gallery. And we are so pleased to be joined today with Gregory Schulte, who is at his home in Madison. Hi, Greg.
Hi.
We're also joined today by Lauren Miller, who's the gallery associate, and Ann Orleski, who is the assistant gallery director. And I'm Teresa Abel, and I'm the owner and art director of Abel Contemporary. So we're going to continue to look at the video of the install, and then how we're going to spend this probably about 60 minutes with Greg. We're going to talk about some specific pieces from the show. Greg has some wonderful videos that he took where he documented the process of making some of these paintings so we can get a better insight into his process. The pieces are stunning in their beauty, they're luminous, and they almost seem magical in how he could possibly created them, and the videos give us some wonderful insight. Throughout this reception, if you have any questions, you're welcome to type them in at any point. Lauren will be keeping track of all of that. If the question seems especially pertinent, she might interrupt and we might address the question right away. But if she doesn't, we are going to open up at the end of the presentation a Q&A period where we can talk to Greg about anything. So again, welcome. And Greg, so you have a number of paintings in the show Tangled where you've studied eucalyptus, and they are just gorgeous. So that's where we're going to start. We're going to look at some of these eucalyptus paintings. So why don't you talk to us about this?
Okay. The one we're looking at now was one of the first in the series, so it's a good place to start. It's definitely the first of the larger paintings. I had done a few smaller ones, And all of the eucalyptus reference that I look at comes from Old Brick Gardens. The outdoor gardens there have some eucalyptus plants. And Kelly and I, my partner Kelly and I, were visiting there one day, and they just were incredible the way they lit up with the sunlight. We had a beautiful sunny day, and I just pulled my cell phone out and started clicking and getting all of these interesting tangles of the eucalyptus leaves as sun moved through them with the cross lighting them up from the back at times. That's what brings out all the color. And then sometimes the front lighting where you get those bright white highlights. So if you get the light just right on them, they just really light up with color. So I had a whole bunch of reference material to work with on that one particular day where the lighting was just spectacular. And, you know, over the next couple of years, I used those references to combine compositions, combine references to make different compositions. So I would piece them together kind of like puzzle pieces and get interesting rhythms and gestures and to get the composition started. And then once the painting is underway, I get into the rhythm of what I'm looking at in the reference, and that allows me to invent a lot of background imagery, echoing certain things that I see and modifying it and change it in a certain way to create a sense of density and depth, you know, that the references didn't have because they were mostly just isolated, you know, leaves in the references. So yeah, this series, I didn't work on all of them consecutively. I kind of came back to them every once in a while, venturing to other types of foliage in between. But all of the references came from Old Brick Garden.
Hey, like in this piece, or any of these actually, you were talking about the lighting, bringing out the color. They seem so magical. Is the lighting at all natural, or are you inventing the lighting and playing with what would be natural lighting?
Well, it was natural. You know, these were all taken outside in the landscape, and you know, the sunlight brings out all that color. The invented things that you see kind of receding into that black, dark space, that's kind of all invented. So I had to, you know, kind of imagine how these things might look as they were receding into a shadowy, deep space. But the foreground one we're looking at now, that limb that moves from right to left over top, and that one that comes toward us down at the bottom with that white leaf in the center, that's what started this painting. And I had originally thought of just leaving the background pure black, like I do in many of my pieces. But once I started adding a little bit of background, all of a sudden it just I got carried away, and I just kept adding more and more invented gestures and filling out that space to the left. But I still wanted to do a piece that had that super black background with just a simple gesture coming across it. So after I finished this one, that's it. Yeah, then I moved on to this. And it was originally going to be just that single stalk moving from left to right here with those big, colorful yellow-green leaves. And I started to invent a little bit of background layers back there. And I thought I was going to get carried away and do exactly what I did in the previous painting, but I forced myself to stop on this one so that I could maintain that kind of infinite dark void behind them that they seem to be receding into.
It's so interesting because to hear you talk about it, it sounds as if there's some spontaneity in the process where you're inventing what you're going to do, and they're so meticulous. It seems almost, it's hard to believe that there's that much spontaneity while you're painting them.
Yeah, I do get a pretty good game plan, like a good reference, a good idea in my mind what I want to do. But there's often a lot of spontaneity that comes in as I'm painting. You know, like all that background stuff I didn't pre-plan. I just started intuitively responding to the gestures that were there, and making sure that they felt right to create the rhythms that I wanted to, kind of both moving from left to right and moving back into the space. So there's a lot of spontaneity in all of these paintings. I'd say in most, at least half the paintings are always invented. things that I'm putting in, just imagined extra foliage to kind of fill out and complete the composition.
This is great.
Now we're going to move on to some process videos. The first one is of a painting called Indigo Buntings.
This is a silent video. So this painting, I started with a black background. Can you guys hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. And I have to start somewhere. So I start with some of the big featured shapes that I want to make, help get down first to drive the rest of the composition. So that's what you see emerging here is the sort of foreground things. And what I'm interested in all of these paintings is that there's subjects that are so close to you, you feel like you could just reach out and touch them. They're within a couple feet. And then I start to work background shapes to kind of push it deeper. So you see a little bit at the top there, some of the distant forest coming in. This reference was shot up at Ferry Bluff. There were 26 painting sessions. These stills are combining into a video. You're going to see at a certain point here, as I get to about the 20th day of painting, there's a bird that popped in. That wasn't there in my original idea. One day I was painting and I got the impulse to put an indigo bunting in. And then the companion bunting ended up coming in on the right side. And then, I just continued finishing it off here to kind of fill out that deep space. And indigo buntings are things that I see up at my cabin up in Black River Falls. And it's one of my favorite things to spot. This was largely based on Ferry Bluff, which is a great hike. If anybody hasn't taken it, I recommend. It's just past Sauk City, just where you start to turn right to go to Baraboo, veer left like you're going over to Spring Green, and about a mile in, look for Ferry Bluff Road. Looks like a nondescript gravel road that's somebody's private driveway, but it takes you about a mile into this great hike well above the Wisconsin River, where you look down on the river and you can see downstream and upstream for miles. So that's what this was based on. And but then I had to get these indigo buntings that I had recently seen up at my cabin into the piece.
This is just the epitome of Tangled, and it's mind-boggling to think about painting this, actually looking at it when it's finished, and even watching the video, it still seems kind of miraculous. Is it confusing, composing something this detailed and intricate?
Yeah, it's very confusing and challenging, but in a good way. I mean, I enjoy the challenge. If it wasn't difficult, I don't think I'd enjoy it. That's what makes it fun to me, is to take on something that I need to figure out and figure out a way to do it. So I had this idea, and it just kept getting more and more complicated. But this kind of drove the idea for the title, Tangled, because this one got really tangled, and I kept using that adjective. And I've heard other landscape painters use that too. So, I know everybody's interested in that tangled aspect of nature. But I tried other more complicated titles, but I just kept coming back to Tangled, because everything that I was doing seemed to have that connectedness, that kind of that you stop somewhere, and if you look at the things right in front of you, like these things you could reach out and touch, you started to notice how nature just starts to get so interconnected. And then you imagine that just going on forever, how everything is just tangled and interconnected in a beautiful way. So
it's impressive to see the paintings be created, because it feels very orderly, the way that you work on your paintings. So it's this really beautiful sort of connection of this order that creates this chaos instead of the other way around. Sort of,
yeah,
sort of, I don't know, created entropy or something. It's very interesting.
That's part of the difficulty in approaching a painting like this. You gotta have something to latch onto and start, and it gets complicated. But if you look, there's gestures, some of these tangled limbs that make arcs and kind of spiral around. It creates rhythms that kind of unify it in an orderly sort of way. If you there's meandering rhythms that circle around in this composition. And I wanted to make sure that I captured those overall big things as I was getting involved in all these little miniature compositions buried within, in between, and behind the leaves.
Well, and I think as a viewer, you get, we know about how your eye, as painters, we think about how the viewer is going to look around the canvas and how to keep your eye moving all the way around. But in these tangled ones, I feel like you almost get lost in them, and it's kind of hard to look away. It's been fun, even with the short period of time the show's been up, to see the attention span that people have standing in front of them, because they're so compelling. It's hard to look away from them.
Mm. Well, that's kind of one of the goals I have. And if I can do it to myself, I know I can do it to other people. So I try to create these compositions that I can look at and see them in a different way every time. And sometimes after I get done with a painting, I'll look at it again, and I'll forget what I had done when I was making it, and I'll start to discover things that aren't immediately apparent. There's all this foreground stuff, but as you start to look deep into the little windows, you start to notice all kinds of little things happen. And sometimes I'll hide things in there, like an insect or something for somebody to find eventually.
Yeah. Next, we're going to look at the process video for a painting called Through the Trees.
So again, if you guys can hear me, this one I started not black, but with a gray ground. So I'll take a different approach with different paintings, sometimes just to keep it interesting, but sometimes because it fits a certain idea or subject. So I started with a mixture of black and white gesso, and then pushed the colors both light and dark from that middle tone. And this one's composite of 4 different references that I had for these trees. That big shaggy bark tree in the foreground comes from my cabin. On the left side, there's some images from north of Minocqua. And then the far right side is another river, Robinson Creek in Black River Falls. And so I knew I wanted to create this composition where there was a tree right in front of you. You can reach out and touch that foreground tree, and then just work the painting back from there to create this sense of depth, and put you in a forest where there's not a clear path. You're kind of trapped by the density of the foliage and the trees, and you're really going to have to kind of meander your way, through the bramble and things like that to kind of get out of here. And I find myself in those situations a lot when I'm hiking in the woods and I got to get off path, and I'm kind of working through thorns and bramble and weaving my way under branches. And I wanted to create that dense feeling of being right in the middle of the forest, but then being able to see, the opening, kind of the light at the far left side there. You can kind of see some light, which might suggest the edge of the forest, over there on the far left. And then I'm really interested in amping up things like color and texture. So I was looking for trees that had interesting lichen and interesting bark textures and color variations, and just kind of amping that up in the painting so that it really revealed the things that I was interested in these particular subjects and landscape.
So, Greg, you've mentioned this cabin that you have, and for people who are familiar with your work, a lot of your work over the years, I think, would fall into the category of magical realism and sometimes almost surrealism, and a lot of human figures. So in some ways, your work has been sort of building towards this. You had done a series of very large studies of corpse flowers, but it's a bit of a departure, this work that you've done the last couple of years. And do you think that cabin and spending all that time in nature played into that, or what was the impetus for this shift in your work?
Yeah, I think that was part of it. I think it also came out of the corpse flower series. So in the last show, I had a series of corpse flower paintings, and in the backgrounds of those paintings, I had to invent context, environments, foliage, and I got really intrigued with that idea of this tangled foliage that I was putting in behind the corpse flowers. And then simultaneously, I'd gotten this property up north, and I was spending time there. and being interested in maintaining the property required me to get into the woods and, do all kinds of things right in the thick of things, in the thick of the woods. So that, and then just going up there and being surrounded, that cabin is surrounded by trees and nature every direction you look. You can't see anybody else or any other properties from the cabin. So that was probably influential, as well as coming out of the Corpse Flower series. There's usually something in the body of work that I created that I springboard into something that's slightly different. And I might come back to more surreal work too. It's kind of like having a long conversation. I don't want to talk about the same thing forever. I want to have some other topics to talk about and explore. But something in a conversation might lead you toward some other topic. And, I think that's what happened coming out of the Corpse Flower series. It kind of gave me a springboard into this.
Yeah, it's great. And your signature way of painting is very obvious. So also, even though the work seems like quite a departure, everyone who comes in knows it's your work. That's been interesting as well. Yeah, it's really nice.
Yeah, I feel that, when I venture off into these different directions and then come back, I feel like there's always a certain hand that I'm bringing, or a certain sensibility to composition, or to these heightened, exaggerated textures or colors. I know that in all my work, I'm always interested in something being pushed right up into your face, into the foreground, that allows me to get what I might call a more intimate view of the landscape, where you're not starting it in the middle ground or background, but it's starting right in front of you, foot or two in front of you. So you get this intimate view of the things in the landscape. And then the intricacies can come out with lighting. If you get the right lighting, you start to get, a view of the textures and the colors that come out with those unique moments. So, and all of these, I might be walking through my woods, every day, but then one day, the way the light hits something, or where I'm standing, will, reveal something in a very intimate sort of way, and, try to capture that idea, sometimes with a reference, or just remember it and try to look for references to help me with that experience.
Next, we have, speaking of your cabin, a video you took at your space up north.
No.
Well, this is nice, because I think it's good to see, what influences the artists.
Mm-hmm.
There should be audio with this, no?
Oh, is it not playing? Sorry, let me just...
I saw your wonderful new little puppy.
Yeah, this Georgie made her way into my videos. Yeah. So let's see.
See if we can't get the audio to work. If not, you can just talk over it.
Okay.
Sorry, I'm just not seeing the option I'm looking for. So is it okay if you just talk over the video?
Yeah, I'll try to remember what I said.
This is very informal, Greg, so you can just,
Yeah, I'll wing it.
Yeah. Okay, fire up that video, Lauren.
Oh, okay, now I found share sound. Sorry about that.
Oh, okay, great.
Oops. Sorry, not this one.
There we go. I thought I'd make a little video to show you my home away from home. This is my cabin I have up in Black River Falls. This is the main room. There's Georgie. Georgie's the 4-month-old dog I just got. This is her second time up to the cabin. She's doing pretty well. Sometimes I paint here, and when I do, I've done a few little paintings here. I set up in this corner, and you can see that from this room, you have more than a 180-degree view of the outside, so you really feel like you're outside. I know some of the artists in the gallery are plein air painters, I don't paint outside. I'm much more interested in being comfortable, away from insects, away from wind, and a nice temperature, just like baby bear. I like to have everything just right. So here's the view from the outside. I'll walk you outside. Here's the dartboard that I use on breaks, just to have something to do. And when we get through the pandemic, I'd like to have people back up here and have some games with them. We have the tape lines there, different lines for different skill levels, and I won't tell you who shoots from which line, because you may know some of the people that come up here, but that's our handicap system, so everybody can have a fair game and equal chance of winning. Come on, Georgie. You can see the river from the inside, but I'll give you a little better view of it. So as you come out, I have 3 paths that take you down to the river. This main path here, they all have steps, stone steps taking you down to Halls Creek. This is a view of the outside of the cabin. Normally I don't see anybody when I'm up here. It's just completely isolated and quiet. Occasionally in the summer on nice days, you'll see a kayaker come down the creek once or twice. We like to take the inner tubes from the bridge upstream and just float back down to the cabin. It takes about an hour and a half. So I have 2,000 feet of creek frontage here on Halls Creek, right about in the middle of the property here. So I have about 1,000 feet upstream that direction and another 1,000 feet down and around the corner. It has a beautiful bluff across the way. I'm filming this on April 4th. So there's still a little bit of ice, but in the winter, beautiful up in the winter, the river gets a little ice on top. Those bluffs are just full of ice that's about 10 feet thick in some areas. And so you can still see some of it remaining here. And every year there's a lot of erosion. Boulders come down from the bluff and sometimes they wash away. The river can get up 10 to 12 feet high and sometimes come all the way up onto the bank here. You have a little beach here and the path goes along the river all the way down. Georgie's starting to go down there. This is another path that I'm taking up, and this branches off here and goes to a path that I maintain going through the 10 acres, and it makes a meandering walk through the woods, comes around and loops back to the other side of the cabin from here. So I paint up here on an occasion, and I also get some subjects up here. Right now there are no leaves out. The leaves haven't filled out yet, but in the summer this is all full of leaves, and the best time for me to capture subjects is late summer, early fall. I like to work with the cross lighting that allows me to see the subjects with both front light and back light, and that really brings out all of the details and gives me a very intimate look at the subject's textures and colors. The show has some tree trunks. Here's an example of the type of barky textures that I like to put into the paintings, and like my subjects to be featured in the foreground, sometimes larger than life size, to really push it up close to the viewer. And then from there, I'll get little glimpses to distant views, but my featured subjects are always within a couple feet, like you could reach out and touch them. They're right in front of you. So you get to see all of the details of the veins in the leaves and the colors and the twists and turns of the forms. As featured subjects, kind of like a still life, really, but the still life of natural materials, or natural subjects, I should say, in their environment. So this is, again, where I like to come up, and sometimes I'm not painting or getting subjects, but I am getting a break and getting inspired and coming back to Madison to my studio with fresh ideas, and my battery's charged to keep going. So it's a nice place to get in the right frame of mind and get away from things.
So next we have The Last Leaves, which, Greg, was this also a painting that was inspired by the cabin?
No, actually, this one I have to give credit to a friend of mine, Tracy Helgeson, just posted a picture of a landscape in New York, and I thought I could use it for the starting point or a point of departure for this painting. And I texted her and she said, go for it. So this one started on a white canvas. And this one's a little different than the others. If you notice, I started with the background, cool, out of focus, hazy colors in that you see behind all those limbs. That was what I was most interested in, is kind of getting that really cool blue and blue violet in the background. And I did that first, and then I superimposed all the limbs in front of that. So the first example that the process video was done on a black ground, and then the forest, the forest through the trees was done on a gray, and this one I started on a white panel. So she, the trees here are again from Tracy Helgeson's picture in New York, but then once I got going, I started to add a lot of invented textures and extra limbs that cut across that cool blue green, blue violet background.
It's really interesting, the variety of ways that you start painting. I feel like a lot of painters, you have a routine. I always paint on white, or I always start from a black background, but yours vary wildly.
Yeah, and sometimes it's driven by the actual subject or composition. I just feel like a certain process would be more efficient. And sometimes it's just because I feel like a change of pace. I want to, try it a different way. And sometimes I'm painting on wood panels, and sometimes I'm painting on canvas, and sometimes I'm painting on metal. And I guess I just like variety.
Yeah, it's just great.
This one's on wood panel, a cradled wood panel. I think it's a birch panel. And sometimes the panels are MDF board, which doesn't have any grain. But if you look at this painting in the light, I was looking at it with Jonathan Wilde last night, and we were noticing a lot of the wood grain was showing. Other panels that you'll see in the show are perfectly smooth because it's medium density fiber board, MDF board. And then some of the little ones are done on metal, galvanneal. It's the same kind of metal that street signs are made out of. And Kelly Hopman introduced me to the metal panels, and I like those. And it requires you to paint very differently because it's so smooth and slick that the paint comes off like butter. And so you gotta modify the way you normally paint to fit that kind of surface. You have to match the slickness of that surface when you're painting on metal.
And so is the benefit that it allows you to get more detail?
Yeah, and again, it's just for variety. Like sometimes if I just finish a metal panel, I don't necessarily want to do another metal panel right away. I might pick up canvas and then, kind of, because it requires you to paint differently on canvas than on MDF board or metal. So sometimes it's just for a change of pace. And then once I do a canvas and a MDF panel painting, I'm ready to go back to metal. And but it does give you a super smooth, no texture at all. That metal panel just allows you to get a lot of detail, without seeing canvas texture or wood grain or, the gesso that you had to smooth. On the metal panels, you don't gesso them. You just paint right on the gray metal. Right. And so you can let a lot of that gray ground come through. It's kind of an interesting material to work on.
So do you work on multiple pieces at the same time, going back and forth, or do you just focus on one piece at a time?
When I can, I like to work on multiple pieces, but often I get into this obsessive mode where I just can't stop working on the piece and I got to finish it. I just get, kind of
Yeah.
drives me crazy, and I just got to finish it. But when I can get 2 or 3 going at the same time, it's nice because I like to be able to rotate them. And because sometimes in the early stages, you can work much more fluidly and gesturally, and that's kind of nice. And then when you get in that last stretch of the painting where you're just honing in on all of the fine tuning and textures and things, it's nice to be able to put that aside and then go to a painting in an earlier stage where you can get a little more loose, with the process. So I prefer doing that, but I often find myself just driving one painting all the way to the end.
Yeah.
So this painting was done in Kelly Hotman's backyard, right?
Yeah, this one's called Kel's Backyard Wonderland. She has a beautiful backyard, and when it's small but really nice. She's been working this garden for years and years, and I think she told, I'm not a good identifier of birds or plants by name. I know what I like to paint, and I know it visually, but I think she called these Solomon seal. Is that right? Does that ring a bell with anybody?
That is.
So there are these nice long horizontal gestures that I was attracted to in the eucalyptus plants too. Those long horizontal reaching gestures with these beautiful leaves coming off, catching light. And we're out in the backyard all the time, but this one particular day, the light was just right hitting the Solomon seal, and you can see that those lights have patches of translucency, where the sun is coming from behind, and kind of midway down a lot of those leaves, and then on the top it's getting direct light, and the color changes so dramatically with light coming from behind or light coming from directly on it. So they were twisting and turning and able to catch light both directly and from behind, backlit. And then there was also a day where I was trying to water the garden, and I had the sprinkler on, and the light mist of the sprinkler attracted this hummingbird, and this hummingbird came and danced literally a few feet from us and seemed to be frolicking in the mist of the sprinkler. And there was enough water settling on the leaves that it took a little bath on the leaves right in front of us. So that became an experience that I needed to turn into a painting.
Wow. It's just glorious.
Thank you. This is, if you look in the lower right corner, this is a painting where I hid some a grasshopper and a little white moth, and there's a little ladybug down there. And it's interesting for me to hear that some people found those things. So that means they were looking around and, not just focused on the foreground leaves and the hummingbird, but were actually letting their eyes wander to the rest of it to find those little, hidden insects.
Yeah, and just this painting, does capture that backyard, which I've spent much time in. And because it's small, but it's really enclosed and feels very private when you get back there. And it's just dense with all of this beautiful greenery and all these intense shade plants. This really captures it well.
Yeah. There's a little pond with a little underneath here, that I didn't put in here, but we just got that filled up yesterday. So we'll bring the goldfish back out of the container in the basement and put them back in the pond. So it really is a little wonderland. There's a lot going on in this little tiny backyard.
Yeah. And so this is in Madison. So it's this kind of lovely woodland garden in the city. And then your studio is also within walking distance of where you live.
Yeah. I have to mention though that Georgie's starting to go into that garden. So we're putting up temporary fencing to protect the Solomon seal in the garden so the plants can thrive out there. So Georgie's still a puppy and trampling through things. So we're trying to figure that out. This is my Madison studio. I think there's audio to this too, Lauren. Okay. So this is my Madison studio that I come to every day to work. I've been teaching remotely from here and painting from here pretty much every day throughout the past year in the pandemic. I've had the building for a few years. It's an old Trachty building. The Trachty brothers started this
these metal buildings here in the east side of Madison, and they were manufactured here and spread internationally, really. But you see a high concentration of these old metal buildings. Some people think they're like Quonset huts, but they have the straight sides. When I bought it, it was all boarded up. It had been a grocery store in the 1930s, and it was used for various commercial purposes. And then the last 40 years or so, it was just cold storage. But all the windows and doors are boarded up, and I replaced all the windows, bought new doors, cut some new windows in it, especially these windows you see up here on the top. They let a lot of light in. Front part of the building is a bedroom. Then there's a living room and kitchen in here. And way at the back part of the building here, past this window, where this used to be a garage door, this is my studio area. So my studio area is pretty small, but I can spread out in the rest of the building. This was another garage door that I filled in with doors. I Airbnb the building out to help cover the cost. So through that 5-foot sliding door is the residential part where the living room, kitchen, and one bedroom is. I put up some soundproofing here to keep the sound controlled between the two areas. And then I retreat in here to work when I have Airbnb guests. I do have a little bathroom in here, and this is a little couch, fold-out couch, and a work area with all my tools for framing. And these 3 boards slide out along this rail to create a work surface. So it's kind of like a tiny house. One of the tiny homes are built pretty efficiently to try to make maximum use of the space. Over here I have my little office area, my printer, my little kitchen area. Over here, fridge and coffee maker up here. This is a closet that holds all my art supplies. And I have a hydraulic easel that can, with corkboard, so I can pin up little paintings while I'm working on them, similar to what you see here. But I can also put big paintings on here. Kelly and I did a commission that was a 5 by 7 foot painting, and that fit on this rail down here. And then there's I don't know if you can see this going, but it has some buttons that lift it up and down and tilt it back and forth. So I have hooks up here. All the paintings are now hanging in the exhibition. It used to be kind of stored around the different hooks here. This painting was in my last show, and it's a corpse flower, one of many corpse flowers that was in my last show. And it's kind of a relevant piece because the backgrounds for these corpse flowers were full of this tangled foliage, and that got me interested in this body of work that I'm presenting in Tangled in this exhibition. A lot of the foliage is invented, some of it's based on multiple references, but I really got interested in the background foliage and started to focus on that as composition ideas. Just quickly take you to the backyard. I had a sign here that said "Beware of dog" for years. I finally got a dog just a couple of months ago, Georgie. So now there is a dog to beware of, and she's terrifying, ferocious. Kelly helped me with the renovation and with getting the backyard in shape. So we put in some sod and made some garden areas. This is our vegetable garden and raspberry garden. Strawberries up here. And for COVID, we put up this metal shelter. It's 12 by 12 metal roof, and I bought a propane fire pit for the middle of it to try to keep us warm. It has screens that can close and also curtains that can close to try to control the wind and the environment. We watched most every Packer game out here all the way to the end. So it got cold at times, but it worked. It helped us social distance and see people more often than we would have. But now that I have it here, I think I'm going to paint out here this summer. So I have a shelter here that I'll bring my easel out. I have a portable easel, and on nice days I'll try to paint out here this summer. So this is the Madison studio.
So this is the final painting we're going to look at, and it's called Calm Before the Storm. And this was a painting that Greg did right before all the shutdowns happened last year.
Yeah, weirdly enough, I was finishing this painting right at the beginning of March, end of February, and then like 2 weeks later, everything shut down and the pandemic hit. And I looked at that painting and I thought, I must have had some sort of premonition or weird intuition, because it's called The Calm Before the Storm, and it's a little bit of an anomaly, in the show. I tried to tie it into the show by putting these leafy foliage here that the figure's holding. But the owl is about ready to, land on her head, with her being unsuspecting. Her hair is very inviting, and maybe it looks like an animal from behind. And then there's a brewing storm, with some unsuspecting people out on the sea there. So there was something that led me to this idea. I don't really know where it came from, but I got this strong vision for putting these references together in this more narrative piece. So I must have had some intuition going on.
So had you already decided to call it Calm Before the Storm, or afterwards, when you realized what was going on, did you think, now I know the title for this?
No, I actually had the title. The title came to me while I was working on it, but I didn't have the title right away, not before I painted it, but during the making of it, I knew what was going on, and I was looking for a title, and I said, it's The Calm Before the Storm. Everything's about ready to be, chaotic in about 1 second. So
yeah. She looks wise, though. She looks like she knows something's about to happen.
Yeah, there's a really pensive look there. I don't think if she knows that she's about to be mauled by this owl, but I've heard of these stories, with the owls kind of come down on people's heads as they come out of their buildings, and they can gash people's skulls open and things. I think they probably think that the top of the head is an animal or something. So maybe that was lurking around in the back of my mind when I was putting these images together.
Well, that's great. Now I'm going to be really afraid of owls. Thanks, Greg.
Well, very rare, it's a very rare event. Probably even more rare than shark attacks. I don't know.
We're all people are going to be Googling this now. Like, how frequent are owl attacks?
Yeah. Well, I think I saw it in one of those true crime mystery things. Kelly likes to watch these true crime things. And there was this murder, and they were trying to figure out how this person got, all these gashes in her skull, and ended up falling down a flight of stairs. And in the solving of it, they suspect that this person had been attacked by an owl, and panicked and ran up the stairs, and then collapsed and fell down. But it looked like she was killed by a person, but it was all this weird freak owl attack.
Yeah, that was the Michael Peterson case. Yeah, I know what you're talking about. Yeah, that's so crazy.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Random. Yeah, it's a stunning painting.
Kelly Harris is asking if this painting is inspired by 1800s art, especially this background.
Yeah, absolutely. I would, Google image and look at things to get ideas. And, sometimes I'll print things off, or I'll just look at things to get informed, get a recent memory of these kind of things. And there was a couple of paintings of ships out on the sea at night, nightfall, where it looks like they were sort of ominous. So I had looked at those and kind of based it loosely, the cloud forms and things, on some of those paintings, kind of put them together. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it does have well, because of the clipper ships, it has a kind of a nostalgic older look from 1800s kind of ships. Yeah.
Yeah.
Wouldn't see those out there today.
But you might get mauled by an owl.
You might.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So, thanks for all of that insight into the work and the videos and everything, Greg. And it's wonderful to see where your inspiration comes from, where you work, how you work in those reference videos. And I don't know, people, if anybody's watching, you are welcome to ask us questions. I'll also mention for people who are watching this and want to recommend it to other people, all of these artist talks and virtual receptions that we are hosting are saved, and you can watch them again on Facebook, and they will also be embedded on our website. So you can watch it again anytime. Anne, you've been quiet.
I'm still here.
Did you learn anything new about the work?
I did. It was interesting. You had brought up his past work being more surrealistic and this being more sort of hyper realism. And I enjoyed hearing a little bit more about that, because that was an observation that I had been contemplating in your work as well. So it'll be interesting to see. I mean, and obviously the piece on the screen right now is more of the surrealism that you've used in the past. So it's nice to see kind of merging.
I would say this is one of them that maybe has a little bit more of the previous work's flavor to it, the more surrealistic work that I had done. There are a couple others in the show, maybe the lure of the peculiar and the bird watchers from the other side that get a little bit more into the surreal. And of course my son likes my more surreal work better, so he was happy to see a few surreal influences still coming out in some of the pieces. But I do, Teresa, we had a conversation about the slightly magical feeling or magical realist feeling of some of those eucalyptus things when we were talking about the shadowy shapes in the background and the unusual lighting. And because I'm inventing a lot of things in there, I'm hoping that even other works in the show, those super black backgrounds, those like infinite dark voids and some of the strange colors that light up behind the eucalyptus leaves, I'm hoping that gives those works a kind of a magic realism kind of flavor to them as well.
I think absolutely. Yeah. I think there's definitely something kind of heightened, like a heightened experience, almost like you're, I don't want to say altered, with substances, but yeah, there's something definitely, it's a heightened experience with the color and lighting. That's super interesting. And I'll mention to people as well that all of the pieces that are in Tangled are available to see on our website. The video of the walkthrough of the exhibit is available, will be embedded on the website if it isn't already. And all the pieces can be seen. And we've been, for people who aren't familiar with Gregory's previous work, we probably, I don't know if we have any of it on our website, but also Greg has a really good website as well, which I think it's GregorySchulte.com.
That's it. Yeah. GregorySchulte.com. Yeah.
So if you're curious,
image galleries there. And
yeah. So you can sort of see the progression of all the different bodies of work. I always think that's really interesting. And then I know that you have just been working like crazy, and you probably want a break now whenever an artist just finishes a body of work. But this whole conversation has made me think, I wonder what he's going to do next.
Yeah, me too. I wonder. There'll be something in your path to sort of take. I think some of the birds that were coming in and some of the figures were later additions. So I'm trying to move the work back into a more narrative kind of direction and let some of the things that I feel about the landscape and the woods that I feel this kind of magical feeling. And you don't always see it, but I'm trying to get that to maybe become visual in the work. The the experience you get when you're out in the woods, sometimes at night or even during the day, and you just feel there's something going on, spiritual or magical, and it doesn't always show up in your photo references, but I can do it in the painting. So I'm trying to find ways to bring that narrative into it. So I think that's, how the birds were coming in and some of the figures are coming in to help maybe go down that path. That's where I think I might be trying to explore. I got some paintings cooking up here in the.
Okay, good. It could all be owl attacks,
Hey, there you go.
I'm into that.
Just random animal attacks. Indigo buntings attacking someone.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, maybe not. Yeah.
Maybe, I don't know. I'll let that one incubate for a while. Kind of owl attacks. Yeah.
Yeah. Good. Are there any other questions from anybody?
No, just a lot of folks saying that this is such a beautiful body of work and that they really enjoy the show.
Oh, thank you. Thank you, everybody. I appreciate those comments.
Yeah. Well, good. Well, so the show is up through May 30th. And again, you can see it online at abelcontemporary.com. The gallery is open Tuesday through Sunday from 10 to 5. And, masks are required, but no reservations are required. So people can come in and see the show anytime. The work is really beautiful online, but if you can see it in person or feel comfortable seeing it in person, the paintings are just luminous and they're really gorgeous, Greg. So thank you so much. And it looks like it's a pretty beautiful day outside. So I think we should all say goodbye and go enjoy the rest of the afternoon outside if we can.
Absolutely. And thank you, Teresa, Ann, and Lauren, for all your work on the show. It's good to have the work out of the studio and up on the walls. So appreciate everything you've done.
Good.
So,
all right. Thanks everybody.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.